Great. Okay, wanted to say hello to everyone and welcome you to the Hampton Bays Civic Association's meeting. As you probably know, since you're here and hopefully have either seen or read some of our mailings or posters, tonight's topic is going to be how CPF referendum water mitigation money will be put to use in Hampton Bays. And we're really lucky to have here tonight Southampton Town Councilman John Bouvier, who from what I understand is spearheading the effort on the town board. And then we have, he said his cohort in crime, I believe, Southampton Town Director of Municipal Works, Christine Fenton. And so I gather she will be talking a bit more from the technical side, although John is an engineering geologist, is that right? Or
I'm an engineer.
Yeah,
mechanical.
okay. Oh. And actually, I think some of your expertise was in the water area, right?
Yes, it was.
Yes, yes. And then also, Representative, County Representative Bridget Fleming was unable to come, but she sent a letter that Paul Brady, who works closely with her, will read, and then he will be taking questions from the county perspective. And of course, we obviously want to have some information, but we also want everyone to feel free to ask questions too, and hopefully get a really exciting discussion going. I have a few little announcements I'd like to make. Tomorrow, there is going to be, and it's a little bit different. At the town, there's going to be a Southampton Town Board meeting, but it's going to be at the Community Center in Flanders. In fact, I think we have Ron Fisher here, who's president of Franca, and he'll, in a few minutes, want to just say a few words about an initiative of Franca, but also I believe, if I'm correct, at the board meeting tomorrow night at 6, there will be some discussion of the PDD situation, I guess perhaps a vote on the extension of the moratorium, and then a discussion of potentially rescinding PDDs.
I haven't seen the agenda, so that's on our agenda. I'm not sure it's scheduled for this coming meeting.
Oh, okay, so it's not 100% then?
It's not 100%.
Oh, okay, okay. And then, of course, our next upcoming meeting will be the 24th, and we'll be announcing the agenda for that very soon. And we always want you to put on your calendar the September 16th, which is our annual fundraiser. We have it up front, Rubber Ducky Day. We're starting to sell our ducks for the duck race. It's our one really major fundraiser, so if you can participate, that would be lovely. Also, in general, we're always looking to have new members, so there's always membership forms available either online or up front. Racing ducks are available for sale. We're always looking for volunteers, and our last meeting was really, I think, terrific. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be there, but run under Vice President Maria Holtz, we had a community forum and wanted you to tell us what some of your issues were. And we compiled a list that we presented to the town, and I have it up front. If you haven't taken it, there are copies of it. And you'll see that a lot of the issues revolved around some of the sort of functioning of the beaches and pavilions along the bayfront, and code enforcement, and so we've made the list up. We presented to the town, and they really were appreciative that we presented it. And then what I'm going to do next is give a Pledge of Allegiance, and then I'll turn the discussion over to John to lead it, and we'll take it from there. So if everybody could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. They moved it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, John, if you could just sort of perhaps fill us in a little bit on...
Sure. Well, as you know, the CPF legislation was a state legislation that was amended recently to allow us to spend up to 20% of the funds on water quality issues. And largely that includes septic system replacement, but also there's a portion of that we envision spending on infrastructure and stormwater mitigation and many other issues that involve our water quality problems. So it's not all just limited to septic, although that will be our first concentration on that. It's something new. We've modeled our law on something called the Cape Cod Section 208, which was a very successful program that Cape Cod had run, and also on elements of the Chesapeake Watershed Authority. And I'm really happy that we passed the law in Southampton with over 80% of you voting for it. And that trend was held through most of the other towns to some degree. So that's quite an accomplishment, I think, but it's a referendum, I think, on the fact that water quality is something that affects all of us tremendously, not just our health, but also our economy as well. The things are integrally linked together. So we went for a long time and traveled around Southampton telling people about what this legislation was about, and I'm very pleased to say that it's passed. So now we have spent the last 6 months or so trying to develop legislation, two parts of legislation, and Paul Brady from Bridget Fleming's office is here, and Christy Fenton, as Janice indicated, is our town engineer. We had put together laws locally that would deal with how we're going to implement our septic system. But the county is the authorizing agency. And for any of the programs that we have seen has been successful in Chesapeake and Cape Cod and other places around the world, it involved a higher authorizing agency like a county or a state. We don't have the means here locally as a municipality to really implement a program of that nature, and typically it's always been through Articles 19, 5, and 6, through the county, that they are the agency that gives you the permits. So that means if you want to go get a new septic system, you can go to the county, and they'll come out and inspect, and they'll give you that permit. The town is only involved in the sense of inspection. Typically on an old septic ring system, that's what the town was involved in. With these IA systems, and you'll hear them referred to, innovative alternative systems, you'll hear them called that, their job is to mitigate the issue of nitrogen, which you've all heard a lot about. I should say it's not just nitrogen, but it's also other nutrients, phosphates, phosphorus, and a whole host of other things. The systems that the county has approved right now, I think, are 3, with 1 coming. And those systems are set at what they call the Rhode Island standard, which is 19 milligrams per liter output. To put that in perspective, an average household is producing 40 to 50 milligrams per liter, depending on the size of the house and what you eat, and so it's not a straightforward number. So I don't like to really talk about it in terms of that number. I like to talk about it in terms of percent reduction. So the systems that we have are showing right now 60 to 70% reduction typically, which is a good thing. We'd like to see more of that, and as new systems get permitted and authorized, we expect those numbers to increase as far as the percent reduction, which means a lowering of the milligrams per liter. So put that in perspective, your drinking water, what's considered safe drinking water, is 10 milligrams per liter. That's what the level is set here. So we wanted to start out slowly because no municipality has done this really before, and we wanted to be in sync with the county. So we've spent many months with Paul, with Bridget, and with Peter Scully and the whole water quality group in the county of Suffolk, trying to put together our plans and how to do that. And slowly but surely, we've come to a point, I think, where the county is about to offer a $10,000 rebate, and I think Paul can probably talk about that this coming 1st of July, actually. We're on track to introduce legislation that will mandate the use of these systems in new construction that's in a watershed area that has a travel time of 0 to 2 years. So what I mean by that is if you have somebody inland, who is using a toilet 40 years ago or 30 years ago, some of that nitrogen is still working its way into the aquifer. It's going to take a long time for it to travel. But we have other areas where we have a very high-speed moving water, shallow aquifers that move 0 to 2 years. So we want to focus on those areas that have that immediate impact while we're working to start to replace those systems. And I should say that there is no silver bullet, that to solve this problem as a whole host of things, which we can talk about. And I'm sorry Maria's not here. She was indicated that we could talk about some of the other things that we might do with the other monies that are available to us in the future. So we expect that to take probably the next 2 to 3 years. The goal is obviously to try to get most septic systems replaced. There are clearly some issues with commercial use and flow rates, and these are all things that we're working out. So we decided to try to make this legislation that's local to those high travel time areas where it has an immediate impact, and also to make sure that it's the costs are borne by, if for new homes or substantial redevelopment, and that's an increase of 25% of the footprint. There's a formula involved with doing that. So I think that some of that's available online right now, and we should have that as a public hearing coming up pretty soon. That's the first part. That's the first stage. We're almost looking at that as a pilot so we can learn. Some of these systems require power and maintenance, and there's a cost associated with that. We're hoping that our CPF fund will be able to offset some of those costs and help subsidize that. The goal here, the policy here, is that we don't want to burden our residents with a huge bill. There is no fixed cost on these systems in that their installation costs can change. So you can have a neighbor across the street that might be spending X amount and you might be spending less or more. It depends on that system. They're designed to replace the current footprint that you have. Some are designed to mitigate phosphorus, so it's good for freshwater bodies. That's one of the things that we're very happy and pleased about. There's a whole host of technical things we can get into, so I'm looking forward to we can have a little bit of a back and forth on that.
Just so that I understand a little better, is this correct that you have to pass the town legislation, and then once that's passed, then you're going to have a program where you'll designate areas that people will be eligible, and it's all voluntary for non-new construction?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Right now.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, you can go to the county right now and have a system installed if you want, a new system. So, in the county, as of July 1st, I believe, we'll be offering that rebate up to $10,000.
We'll be accepting applications on July 1st.
For July 1st,
So you'll be accepting applications for July 1st?
Yes.
Yeah,
July
and
1st.
and even though, as you pointed out, that depending on the type of current system you have and the issues that are involved with that particular system, the cost of upgrading can vary, but it's standard that you can pretty much get some sort of incentive up to an actual dollar amount up to $11,000. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
That's the maximum.
And it's actually $10,000, if you don't mind me adding on to it. I'm sorry, it's a $10,000 grant, but if you go to a pressurized shallow drain field, that'll be an extra $1,000 grant award for that, because it's a different distribution system that's a little bit more expensive. So you have the meat and the potatoes portion of the septic system, and then you have the field where it discharges the effluent and it gets infiltrated into the ground. So if you do the pressurized shallow drain field, that's the area where you can get the extra $1,000. It's a little bit above and beyond the meat and potatoes treatment, if you will, to the 19 milligrams per liter nitrogen.
And I'm so sorry, I should have made an announcement. Would you mind coming up? If you have a question, feel free to interject, but if you would just come up to the mic, because we're filming it, so that way,
And you want to see the website?
Well, yes, that's what I was going to do.
Oh,
Okay, so if you're interested in these opportunities for grant allocations, the website is http://reclaimourwater.info, and the applications will be accepted beginning July 1st.
And then what you're talking about, are these the 3 new systems, or are these just of the current, and then there's the 3 new ones that have been approved?
There's a iterative process to approval through the county pathway system. So there's 3 systems that are currently in the piloted program. There's a secondary round that's going through the testing, or the beta phase, I'll say, this upcoming year. So there'll be more technologies coming as this program progresses. Am I not?
Mic a little closer.
Okay.
You all speak closer.
Oh,
Yes.
sure.
Thank you. So as we move forward in this program, the newer technologies and the better treatment rates will be released.
So then you're saying the 3 new ones that have been approved are still in the pilot stage, is that correct?
They're in the pilot stage, but the county is allowing them to be installed, and they require that the manufacturer report on them for a 3-year period.
So for all intents and purposes, you can get them.
You can get
and
them.
then the county will inspect them. The requirement is that they'll inspect them twice a year to make sure that they're performing. They went through extensive pilot testing to determine their eligibility and utility. So that every system that goes to the county needs to go through that process in order to be used in the. But clearly these are new technologies, so they want to keep an eye on it, and I'm glad they're being really responsible in that regard, because that's an important thing to do, and we'll be able to get a lot of data from that and go forward.
So is when you said, will the county come in and inspect them twice a year?
Yes.
And then is there a maintenance component that the homeowner has to
There
undertake?
is, but we hope the county will cover that. We intend in our rebate to cover that. So it's roughly a $300 a year charge, so it's not a huge burden, but we would like to cover that. It's important to us to get the data so we know what's successful and what isn't before we expand and start to amend our law to widen that out relative to the CPF funding.
Okay. Did you have a question? Yeah, if you would, be so kind.
I wonder if you could give us some sense of what these systems cost overall. You're getting $10,000 rebate. I suspect that these are a little more expensive than $10,000.
They are, but that's close to the cost. The quoted costs are, as low as $7,000 to $12,000 or $14,000. Depends on the system and what's integrated with it. But the installation costs are really what can be different, can be that could increase that amount. So while they're all a fixed cost to be, as a system, the cost of installation could be higher in some areas depending on the geology and the circumstance. They require power. So a small power cable has to be connected, and then that's to drive the system.
So they could cost as much as $15,000 or
It's-
$20,000 or $30,000?
Well, no. The most I heard
I'm
there
thinking of
was-
solar panels and how much they cost and how there were little rebates here and there.
Right.
But I'm wondering, what is what is this parameter here?
You want to?
Well, we also have the CBGB
We do,
grant.
yeah.
So I think that
Sure. Thanks for the question.
you are closer to the $14,000 to $15,000 range, but there's really, it would be very difficult for us to speak in generalizations what each person is going to end up paying, because what happens if you had built your deck or patio over your sanitary system and that has to get removed? So it doesn't really account for landscaping, patio work, that sort of retaining walls, that sort of thing. In addition to the grant opportunity offered by the county, there will be also, very similar to the solar programs out there, a possibility for low interest grant opportunity, loan opportunities through community block grants to carry out the balance of the cost of the installation. So I do not know the logistical details of that loan opportunity, whether it will pay for the landscaping items associated with it, but I know that most definitely it would cover the balance of the system installation. And I wanted to clarify, when I say the meat and the potatoes portion of a sanitary system, in my mind, that's the treatment system itself. There's two components to a sanitary system. There's the treatment chamber type system where the chemical process is taking place, and then it goes into a leaching component where the effluent is discharged to the environment. So I apologize for saying it the way I did, but each system is a little bit different in the way they treat the sanitary process. So
So to give you an example, if you have, depending on where your system is now, If you want to keep it there, obviously that's going to be a lower cost than if you want to move it. And if it's in a driveway, which some are, needs to be supported for that weight. There's a whole host of issues that you can imagine that could affect those overall costs. And that's why I refer to it as the installation cost as opposed to the system itself, the cost of that. Those are pretty fixed. That's what the manufacturers have been really, really good at working with us and working with applicants for those systems. As I understand, there's been some pilots here that have been done in East Hampton, and so far it's working pretty well. We also we have a rebate system. We had one in place in Southampton. We intend to restore something like that, and the board would determine what the cap is on that, 5 to 15,000, whatever the CPF fund, whatever we see. When we're first doing this, we'll put together an advisory group, which we're in the process of doing now, which will determine that for the first part, and then once we get the kinks out of that legislation and that permitting process, it will revert to the board, to the building department, as if any other system, other permitting application would, and it would go through, which is typically what the municipality does right now. But we have to learn a little bit. We've never done this before, so that's why I keep saying we want to be very cautious, and myself in particular, I think that you learn, and we've learned a lot just by watching what other municipalities have been doing, and I think we want to bring that learning curve to Southampton so our residents don't get surprised.
So if I understand, the initial money is coming from the county, but then when do you think that the money from CPF that'll be in addition to it or augment it?
Well, that's one of the, as you can imagine, that's one of the difficulties. How do we reconcile that? I don't want it to be unfair to anyone. So I say if you want a system in right now, go to the county, because the county's got money, but I don't know how long the county will have money, and how much of our rebate will offset that. So that's something that we're talking about internally in developing our rebate system and how exactly we'll do that.
And could you talk to the county perspective then?
As far as
As far as the money being available and the timing stage of it, yeah.
well, as far as the money being available for the county, the county is actually targeting the most vulnerable areas first. That's what's going to happen first. So from that perspective, I think the county exec said there was like 400,000 or so that's available that people are going to be able to get grant funding from. There's also as far as the loan program goes, there's $1 million that's going to be through the Community Development Corporation and Long Island Funding Corps, which is going to be supported by the Hampton National Bank, and so that's where the loans itself is going to come from. It's going to be a 3% interest rate of what the loans are going to be. So that's what I have for funding that I could tell you.
Mm-hmm. So in other words, you could cover both parts of it. One is the outright grant, and then the other part is getting the low interest.
One is a grant, one's a loan. Yes.
Yeah.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how you doing?
Couple of questions. I'm a little confused on this. So the county has money available, and the town has money available. Can one apply for grants from both entities?
Well, that's what we're discussing right now.
Yeah.
Right, that's right.
Obviously, it would be, I feel personally, and I'm just one board member, but I feel that if both those funds were available, that our town residents should be able to take advantage of it. But down the road, that may not be the case. And that's my only concern about that. Obviously, we want to try to offset the cost to our residents as much as possible.
So also, just a couple of questions. The town's plan, I think I understood, is going to mirror the county's plan. And I understand under the county's plan that you cannot get a rebate. Like, there are certain requirements, and one of the requirements is that you have to be in the, I think it's the 0 to 2 flow zone. That's what you call it.
Let me define.
Well, Two questions on that. One is that in the CPF project, sorry, I got distracted now. The requirements, under the county program, you have to be in a certain zone, but also there have to be 3 full-time residents in the household. Is that going to apply to the town program as well?
I can't answer that. We haven't developed the law yet.
Okay.
We want to try to be in sync with the county and what they're doing. The county, I should also say, is developing something called a LINAP, which is a Long Island Nitrogen Action Plan, which defines those areas of high loading, and so we've worked hard with the county to establish that so that we
Right,
can
so,
determine.
but the county plan, right now, I looked it up, so the county plan, you have to have 3 full-time residents, or you're not eligible for a rebate. So, there you go, folks. So, and I don't know if the town is going to do that
It's
as
not
well.
it's not something we've considered.
Okay, and in the CPF project plan, there was a map, and it showed the zones, the flow zones, which I think is kind of what you're talking about. Can we still rely on that map, or is there a new map?
You can rely on that map right now, but our goal is, when we roll out the law, is that it's going to be synced up with the LINAP map that the county is
With the
producing for us.
county's map.
Yeah.
If you talked a little bit about, or somewhere I read, I think you mentioned a new law saying that if you build an extension or a new construction or an extension that increases the home more than 25%, you would be required to install a system. Can you still get a rebate even if you're legally required to install the system?
The short answer is, it should be, I would hope would be yes, but that's not in our law right now. Right now, we want that burden to be passed on to the developer or the construction of new housing or substantial redevelopment.
The project plan, and you mentioned the advisory committee, I was under the impression that the advisory committee was the entity that was going to decide what projects should proceed in the town.
Well, let's make a distinction. We have the septic system replacement, which is one part of the water quality plan. I see projects, when I hear the word projects, that's something above or different from septic system replacement. So when we look at that, that could be anything from aquaculture programs to infrastructure. To
But not
stormwater
that was my
not
question,
septic,
is that
yeah.
to make that a priority if you don't
Well,
have the advisory committee?
But the advisory committee, its original intent is to, at first, advise our director of CPF, first on these new systems as they go in, to get some data to understand, find out what works and what doesn't work. It would revert then to the building department, as I said before, as a standard sort of application. Then that advisory group would then be working on the projects, as you call them, as I understand them, which are things with long-term capital requirements and infrastructure. It's a bigger expense. It's handled differently under CPF law. There's some things we can do and can't do under that law, and some of these capital projects go multi-year. What you might envision. There's nothing that's in front of us right now, but that's sort of how we see the separation between the advisory group working on those one-off types of applications versus the septic system, which should hopefully go on autopilot.
Right, but the town is free to accept or not the recommendations of the advisory committee?
Absolutely.
Does the advisory committee have any other responsibilities, if you will, other than to review proposals, I guess, plan proposals?
Well,
and
to
advise a yay or a
to
nay?
advise how it works, much the way it's modeled after the Community Preservation Fund operates in purchasing land right now. There's a group of people who advise the board on purchases for CPF, for preservation of property. And that would be pretty much the same responsibilities, but for a separate group of people who are well-versed in water quality issues, from hydrology to marine science to water science, and that's what we're putting together now. We're going through that interview process as we speak.
And the CDBG grants, I thought that, I'm not sure, but individuals, private citizens can apply for CDBG grants? I thought only municipalities could apply for money from CDGB. CBGBs, I can
That's
send
how
it
it
right in.
typically works, but I believe they're housed under community block grants. And in this instance, they're gonna use those funds to supplement the grant.
They,
fund.
who's the they?
The county is gonna start with that, using those, discussing with applicants their possibility of using this, community block grants to supplement the costs that they need to install one of these new
Are
units.
these federal grants, the I can't say, I can't say this.
I have that same
CBGBs, you know, my age is coming out here.
I have that.
That's a federal program, right?
I can't speak to that,
Okay.
that
Paul
issue.
can.
The CDBG does come from Fed.
Right, but you're going to work on getting it so that, getting it so that private people can apply as opposed to, what I know now is only municipalities can apply for grants. But you could look that up if you don't know.
Well,
I mean,
I'm not sure I understand.
I'm not.
you can't
I'm not
ask?
certain about the
can't get
individuals applying for a CDBG grant.
Right,
That I'm not certain.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean, because you talked about loans, but I didn't think that individuals could get loans through community development block grants, that only municipalities, maybe some not-for-profits.
I'm sorry, I understand your question.
But not
As I understand
individuals.
it, it's a pool that they're looking at, that the county's looking at, to be able to help individuals from one grant to help many people. And I'm not versed on what the county's doing, but at that website, I believe, Reclaim Our Water, .info, I believe there's information on that and what the county intends to do. We don't have any intention of doing that at this point. We look at it solely as a rebate and incentive-based program that's given to individuals and is reviewed on that basis.
Wouldn't it be nice if you put something together, like an info sheet for everybody with all the grant possibilities and the requirements? That would be a great thing for a legislator to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Well, John, I'll start with you, if you don't mind. How much money is in the CPF fund? So we'll know what the 20% per year is
Well-
currently.
It's a good question. It varies from year to year.
Right, of
It's
course.
obviously, it's based on a 2% sales tax.
Right.
There's an exemption for homes of a certain amount, and it varies on sales transactions. Right now, our fund is fairly healthy. It's around, it's close to $90 million in the fund. And that fund is primarily as you know, was designed to preserve land.
Right.
And that's what it was purchased.
Okay,
That's why it was
so
managed that way.
90 million, so
So roughly,
20%,
we're
it could
saying-
be,
we're
it could be
saying-
up to 20 million a year.
Yeah, what we're operating under, what we're estimating is between 7 and 12 million because it has to be based on a prior year, so we can't really predict what one year would
Okay,
do.
but right now, it's 18 million then, available.
Yeah,
Okay.
if we had the law, it would be, but
But
next
don't,
year
isn't
if
the law
sales.
passed though, John? I'm not
Yeah, but
following.
what I'm saying is we haven't implemented the local law for that yet.
Okay.
So if that amount went down, certainly it
Understood, but
would
okay,
be
you have
based-
18 million
Yeah,
give it
roughly,
available now.
roughly.
It was in the paper, East Hampton had to spend the money each year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you saw that or residents
That's part
read
of the
about.
CPF requirement.
So Southampton has to spend the 20% each year?
No.
In other words, East Hampton was required to spend, that's what was written in the
Yeah,
local
that's-
paper.
that's not correct.
So Southampton can accrue it for, and not.
You
okay.
can't accrue it, but you can spend up to that 20%.
But are you obliged to spend the 20%?
No, you're not.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
Absolutely
Okay.
not. It's just let's say you have a bulk of the CPF fund.
understood.
And we have access to 20% of it, up to 20%.
I think a lot of people, at least the gentleman sitting near me, were saying, it sounds that it's undefined yet. What you're saying about the town, it's not defined yet. People are asking, you're saying, we're not sure, I really can't answer that yet. But, so I just want to clarify, so if I'm not quite understanding and he's not, I'm sure most people, right now, are you saying that the county is offering up to around 10,000 or 11, but the town isn't offering to augment that, like Janice was asking, not yet?
No, we have.
So that hasn't happened yet, but are you
Right.
thinking in the future that
Oh,
if
yeah,
the county is offering, the town might augment, I'm sorry about that, the town might augment that?
Absolutely.
So there might be more money than the 10, but you don't know how long the 10 is going to last, unless I
Right,
got that.
right.
Okay.
And we have the legislation drafted, and then it's got to go to public hearing, and as you know, these things take time to get out, so.
Are you going to mandate?
Well, the
For
man-
people near the water, I guess is what you're
The-
saying, the zero. Are they going to be mandated that you have an X amount of years, you have to put in a new system?
The mandate right now, the way the legislation is drafted, is that will be for new construction
Right.
and substantial remodeling.
And
In
what
those
about the 0 to 2?
In those 0 to 2 year.
What about
flow
existing
periods.
homeowners that are in this area that's more sensitive?
There's no mandate in that
Are
regard.
you thinking the town's going to mandate it?
No,
You don't know
we're
yet?
not.
Okay.
We'd like it to be voluntary, and that's one of the reasons that we've rolled it out this way, is that it should, I don't believe it should be mandatory. I think it
Okay.
should be voluntary.
Okay.
But it should be voluntary with a path that's not going to put you in a poorhouse.
Right, people might
You
not
know,
be in position
that-
to afford it, understood. My last question for now, and we've been waiting. Besides septic, so that the Bay has issue now, of course, I'm saying what's stating the obvious, but great that this town is looking to deal with septic in a systematic way. But what about the other ways to, help solve the problem?
Well, I'm
Are we
glad-
gonna talk about planting oysters or mussels and removing algae from the bay? Believe it or not, I asked Dr. Gobler and the other professor from Stony Brook. I can't remember his name, but you might know who I'm talking about. There's a second professor from Stony Brook.
There's a lot.
Oh, that was involved in, sorry. And he told me, I asked him, what about removing the algae from the bay? It seems like a sensible approach, and he said, yes, that would be effective, but not necessarily cost-effective. But he said it would be an effective remedy because you're taking the algae out once it's identified. So what are we doing to take care of the issue now? Septic could take, there's going to be algal blooms this year. Putting in septics and doing this over 5, 10, 20 years will help 30, 40, 50 years down the road, but what's going to be done?
Well,
between-
and I'm really
Okay,
glad you
thanks.
asked the
Okay.
question, and it's a long answer, and it might be a time for some give and take. But it's one of the reasons initially when the law was amended or proposed, the proposed amendment was to mandate that we use up to 80% of that 20% for septic system replacement. I call that the legacy issue. This is something that's been going on. As this nitrogen is traveling through our groundwater. That's going to take a long time to manifest in any significant way a reduction in that. So what do we do to fix the immediate problems? What can we do? What's in our power? Well, there's all sorts of infrastructure ideas. We're opening the Tiana Center as an example here on this Wednesday at 10 o'clock. I'd love to have you come. It's a marine center. It's a pathway for young people to learn how aquaculture works as a way to put more clams, oysters, and shellfish back into our bays. So it's a biological restoration a part of that. There's a lot of work, as you said, Cornell is doing it, Stony Brook is doing that. There's a macrocystis concept of trying to sop up or use algae, certain types of algae, using other algae to consume. There's a lot of really good work going on, measuring the types of chlorophyll in algae and ways to deal with that. The danger is, if you get too efficient at removing nitrogen, you can cause a sort of a host of problems as a result of that. Nitrogen is not a pollutant; it's a nutrient, and there's natural balances, and I'm sure this gentleman will speak to that issue. But we're looking at all sorts of ways of doing that. I mean, just to give you an example, we're talking about different types of systems. We gave presentations to the Army Corps of Engineers, looking at our artificial inlets, looking at tidal gate systems, looking at infrastructure when you have to change road elevations due to sea level rise. You have to build in resiliency to the shorelines. How do you do that? What should we do now to take advantage of that so we can solve our immediate problems? Some of the ways we can do that is Bay Seawater Exchange. It's one project. I know Maria's not here, and
She
Janice.
just snuck in.
Did she? Hey, there she is.
She's just snuck in.
That's near and dear to their heart. And I'd hope that Maureen Dunn would be here, who's a water scientist who I have a lot of respect for, looking at her publications. I don't know her personally, but her publications were really interesting. But she was involved in the Great South Bay Breach and studied that and understood what that's about. And I would have loved to have her here to talk about those issues. But we have other issues we've looked at, reversing the Shinnecock Canal, ways of causing a cross connection between Gardner's Bay and I mean the Peconic Bay and what's here. Those kinds of things and things we haven't even thought of. These are more immediate ways, and technologies that will evolve that may have a greater impact, a more local impact. But the main goal here is biological restoration. That's what we're looking at. We need to get our bays healthy again. Removal of algae is certainly part of that, but it's not all of it. It's also things that we have to remove that keep coming into our water through our roads, through stormwater management, off of lawns, there's a whole host of things that we fought very hard to make sure that we weren't limited to 80% or use on septic, that we would have only a few $1 million to work with. We fought very hard to make sure that it's not now. We fought hard, so it is not a restriction.
You're at liberty to spend the money.
Right, but we recognize that septic system replacement, particularly in those high loading areas, is important right now. So you'll see a more immediate impact in those high travel times, but in the meantime, as you're replacing these systems as sort of in a rolling fashion, you're going to end up having those systems replaced over the next few years, maybe decade.
And John, could you elaborate a little bit? I know one issue that I'm always concerned about is that, of course, it's important to reduce the nitrogen flow with upgraded septic systems, but the aquatic life, we talk about 10 milligrams for drinking water standard, but aquatic life, I think, to be viable is about half, isn't it? Like 0.45 or something like that?
Well, there are different standards. It has to do with salinity and temperature and oxygen, and it's a complicated thing to look at. If you think about it, Shinnecock Inlet, before Shinnecock Inlet, this portion of the bay where we are right now was basically a stagnant area, mostly fresh water. It had no exchange. So what we're really talking about is restoring it to that post-1938 hurricane breach, because that's what you all enjoy now. But that's not natural if you were born in 1937. So, where do you draw that line? Well, clearly we want to have a healthy economy. We have, people who earn their livings from our water. It's a recreational destination. It's clarity. It's important that it's healthy. It's important that we have healthy water. Those are all things that are involved in all of that. So there's many ways, I believe, to solve that issue. There's also some really interesting things. I think Alex Greger was here at one time talking about culverts and ways to move water around, and we have the ability to generate power through tidal exchange. I brought just, a lot of people say, well, what is that? What does that mean? Well, it's a little propeller in the water, and it produces light, and it produces electricity, and you can use generators like that to produce power that you might need to go against tidal gradients, to start designing things. And the concern is to have an aesthetic design that matches the aesthetic of our area, because that's where the money is, for lack of a better term. That's how important the health, the aesthetic health of our area it is. So we're not talking about huge infrastructure projects, but rather small immediate effects that we could possibly have through engineered inlets, tidal gates, a reoxidation of water, moving stagnant areas, all those sorts of things. And that might come with some of the things that you suggested that Stony Brook is working on as well.
I think that's terrific, because again, I think a concern of a lot of people is the fact that as much as you may reduce the flow, it's impaired now, so you have to, how do you restore the already impaired waters and concurrently reduce the flow into them?
Yeah, it's a multi-tiered approach to doing that. And when you think about it, you talk about the health of our fund. Well, we have a healthy fund in Southampton, but not other CPF towns have as healthy a fund. And it's not guaranteed that it will always be healthy. And it's not that huge amount of money when you think about it in terms of some of the projects we're talking about. Christine and I talk about this a lot with projects, infrastructure projects, just to manage stormwater. This very heavily laden water with phosphorus and nitrogen and pesticides and all sorts of other stuff that comes off of lands and down streets. So it's a new paradigm that we have to manage water in a way that considers the water quality and where that water is going, not just eliminating flooding, but then what are you going to do with that water as well?
Do you have the ability then, say you could, it sounds intriguing, and I've expressed this tidal gate system, but I would imagine with the cost of that, you'd need to maybe do some sort of bond or borrow against the CPF fund. Do you have the ability to do that?
Well, that's not where I see those large capital projects coming from. I see it coming from federal monies that, as part of, I mean, as an example, FEMA is doing coastal resiliency in this area, as you know, with the telephone pole, the power poles and that. That's actually FEMA money that was designed to try to make our coastline more resilient as a result of Hurricane Sandy and Superstorm Sandy and whatever else comes. So there is money available to do that, and I think the plan needs to be as a part of an infrastructure. If we need to not harden our shores, but we need to protect our shores, we need to raise roads, we need to move infrastructure, well, we ought to consider the efficiency of being able to also protect our bays by doing that. And we can do that with controlled systems to exchange bay and seawater. It's just one element. I mean, this presentation it's gone to the governor, and we're trying to make inroads and saying, look, we're doing all these things. Let's do something that's going to help the immediate issue. That's to answer your question.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify one thing. We're talking about concentration of nitrogen from septic systems and drinking water. The concentration of a septic system that's the ultra design might be 20 milligrams per liter, but that would seem like it's high, but you got to remember it's getting diluted into the water. So the water level nitrogens are a factor of much, much less than that. So it's not just like we're putting it too high a level, it's just that it's not getting diluted enough.
No, it's a great point, because that's why we talk about the percent reduction issue, and it does in every sub-watershed. It doesn't end up being the same concentration.
That was just a point for clarification.
Yeah.
The other question is, the implications there's too much nitrogen is causing the harmful algal blooms. This is something which I don't agree with personally, but has anyone quantified what the amount would be necessary to reduce the harmful algal blooms?
Well, Chris Gobler's he did a study at Weesa Creek, and we're using some of that data. He's also doing that mapping now with the line app, and those numbers should come out in that mapping.
They were due last month.
Yeah, well, they're due the end of this of June, and so we're close to that. But he did a presentation. There was a work session I think he did with the town board where he quantified some of that.
Because somewhere along the line, there should be a quantified number of the number of septic systems in our town. How much is that contributing to the number, and how much we're going to reduce it by?
No, I agree.
And if you can't come up with that number, we don't have a goal, because it's significant. You don't want to put septic systems, let's say, south of Dune Road, because that goes into the ocean, which is not a problem. You don't want to put up Peconic Bay, which has some of the lowest nitrogen loading anywhere in the world. So it's a very narrow area, and that's just not the 0 to 2 year introduction rate. So that I really want to emphasize that, because when LIPA first came out with the solar collectors, they gave it to anybody on a first come, first served basis, without site evaluations. Some of them were put under trees. We shouldn't make, money is limited, we shouldn't make that mistake. We should have a criteria in terms of what's going to give us the best potential value for this. And that's going to depend on flow rate and where it's going to go into. So LINAP has to come up with these numbers, and we should be following those in the future. I just want to throw out one other thing.
Well, and Steve, you and I, we've corresponded on this issue.
It's Roger, yeah, for sure.
I'm sorry,
yeah, for sure. Yeah,
and
yeah.
we've corresponded on this issue a lot.
Yes, I just want to emphasize
There's
it.
portions that I absolutely agree with you, and it comes down to that same kind of argument of experts that happens too, and to get those numbers quantified so that we are working to a common set. That was the whole reason why we held off with our CPF plan, that the line app would ultimately be able to replace that. And we've had a lot of conversations with them and have discussed the same issues.
Because nitrogen is the basis of our productivity of our bay.
Absolutely.
And you get a point when you go too low, you
Too
create
low,
other
you have a
problems,
problem,
and we
yeah.
uniquely in the United States have perhaps reached that.
Right, and
So-
it's a difficult balance to hold.
It's not difficult until you get too low.
Yeah, but once you get too low, then you do have a problem.
That's correct, and I maintain that's where we might be. The last thing I want you to throw out is if you want a more immediate response for reducing the nitrogen that's going into the upper glacial, which goes into our bays, if that's the issue, you might want to consider going back and mandating irrigation from that aquifer. In other words, don't allow irrigation to come from our drinking water, which is or significantly it's the Magathy. In Hampton Bays, by the way, we get our drinking water from the Lloyd aquifer. So all this nitrogen that's going into the water, supposedly, that's getting into our drinking water, does not affect Hampton Bays, because our water comes from the Lloyd aquifer, which is below the Magathy, and the nitrogen levels there are extremely low. So if the drinking issue is not as significant to Hampton Bays, where the Bay issue might be more significant.
I think you're right, the Bay issue is significant here.
But what you could do, you could go back and mandate in that 0 to 2 year intrusion zone, that everybody irrigate, if they're going to irrigate, it's a choice, but use their own little well from a, that penetrates only the upper glacial, and that would intercept some of that water and save the Magathy water, which is for our drinking. I haven't heard that before.
Now, it's
But-
a good point, and as you know, that some of the consumption for irrigation is so high, and why does it come from drinking water? That doesn't, makes no sense to
It could be up to
us.
40% of our
Yeah,
water.
and it's actually, in some cases, has lowered the water table somewhat at those extreme uses.
Shelter Island doesn't even allow it right now. You
So
can't go back.
we've talked about ways to mitigate that, you know, that there's a penalty on water usage over a certain amount and how we bring that down. That's a separate legislative
I
issue,
wouldn't
but I
suggest
would like to
I wouldn't
marry
suggest a
that.
penalty, because that's governmental. I'm just saying, if people want to irrigate, let them use the water, which is already nitrified, okay?
No, my point being that some houses use a lot more water to keep their lawns green than other
But
houses.
let them use it from the upper glacial, because that intercepts the water that's going into our bay.
But they're still pulling it from wells that have been put in, particularly in Hampton Bays, for the Hampton Bays Water District. Those wells are set, and you're right, you're absolutely right. They should be told to put their wells in those aquifers. I agree with you.
Okay, just that's.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point, thank you.
Good evening. My question is for you, Dan, Mr. Brady, and Bridget Fleming. I live on Indian Run Road in East Quogue. In here, it's a target area, it's in danger, 200 feet from Shinnecock Bay. And right down the road, 4 or 5 homes, there's been installed one of your test wells for the last 2 years. You may know about it. It's also 200 feet from Shinnecock Bay. If today I asked you, what can I do to get a new system in my home? What is the county offering? In addition to that, I'm in a fast flow area, I can almost guarantee you that.
So if I'm understanding your question, you want to know what the county is offering?
Yeah, if I said today, I'd like to make a plan to install one of these new systems, what is the county offering to do?
Well, as far as funding goes, the application process really doesn't begin until January 1st.
January?
July 1st, I'm sorry.
Okay, but that's here.
That,
Tell me on January 2nd, I'm here, and I'm asking you, what is the tentative plan of the county offering? Do you know that yet, or is that still not established?
that I can't give you a definite answer for. I would have to get back to you on.
Okay, that's fine.
But, you know, I could say, Al, that you can go and apply for those systems at the Suffolk County Department of Health right now. Whether the rebate system is part of that application, that I can
So
understand.
first
Paul
you
can't
apply,
answer
then
that.
they'll tell you what the rebate will
Yeah,
be? Is that
that's
the
what
way it is?
I would suggest. I would go ahead and apply.
I want to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly. If it's in regards to funding, so the county is going to be accepting applications beginning July 1st. Okay, for the grant program, and so you can go ahead and make that application.
Yes.
If that's what you're asking.
It is, yes, I am.
That's what you can do that beginning July 1st. You most definitely could do that.
At this point, does the county have a program that on July 2nd, they're going to answer me as to what they're offering?
Is that the
Now, what- the
11th?
question is to you, young man.
Is that the 10,000? Will he
Is that
automatically?
Yes, that's the 10,000 that you.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's great. So in other words, if I paid $6,000 of my own money, I could probably put in a new system at no cost to anybody but myself.
Well, each septic system is a case-by-case basis, as you heard the councilman, reiterated so many times, and Christine has said the same thing. It all depends on the work that needs to be done. I couldn't sit here and tell you that it's going to be 7,000 or 10,000, and you go apply for it and it's something else.
Tell me approximately?
There's a means test that's associated with that, and that's when you apply, that's the information that you would get back. And I don't know what the county means test is, but I'm sure it's based on income and other things, and that's what you would get. You would be in that process, you would get that information back to you, and What I'm saying is as a representative of the town, is that I can't match that yet because we don't have the legislation.
I
out,
know,
but we're-
that's harder for you guys. They seem to be, what the county seems to be ahead on the whole program. And they were testing for quite a few years.
That's right, yep.
We do have a well being tested, 5 houses from mine on India Run Road.
But if, just to clarify it, July 1, the county program is allegedly up and running, is that correct? So that you can apply.
You can apply.
And there's up to $10,000 or $11,000 available in grant money, but there's some criteria, there's means testing, among other things.
Yes, that's correct.
But say you were on the lower threshold of the means of the income, so you could get the full, say, 10,000.
I don't think Paul could answer that
And yeah,
question.
the councilman's actually
think
correct.
you're saying you have to
That's not
apply.
something that I could actually.
When we
give you.
apply, you'll ask us certain questions, we'll answer them,
Right.
and then you'll be able to answer it
Yep.
more clearly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. I think that's good.
Okay. And then,
Just answered, the means test is based on income?
I think that's one of the.
That's one of the criterias.
So if you're rich, it can be poison.
is it also based on the cost? Like, if you, say you have a system that's going to be $20,000, and somebody else has one that's only going to cost $14,000 to upgrade, are both of them eligible for the 10,000, or is the 10,000 only for when you have a larger cost involved?
I don't think
don't
that.
think that's-
No,
I think the expense goes towards a number of different items. It goes to the system that you elect to choose, which could go to the footprint of the system that you're looking. If you have a wide open area, space might not be the largest concern, but if you are on a quarter acre, half acre lot, and you value your backyard, a smaller discrete footprint might be more desirable for you. If you're in an area where it could become buoyant, you might want to use a concrete system instead of a plastic-based system. So those are all different areas that go to the expense of the system that you could put in. I don't think that they're going to give you more or less money depending on that kind of element that you choose. I think the sheer fact that you're going to be working in the 0 to 2 year range and you're looking to put an IA system in is going to be the strongest push for you. The other means test elements, those are going to be more determinant than the system you choose.
And as an example, in the Chesapeake watershed, they had slightly different options. They had an option because they had many systems that mitigated different amounts. And they were able to do a formula based on income and the affordability and the ability to pay, and also distance from the water. They had this in sections, and they came up with a very complicated system that was based on about 6 or 7 different manufacturers, and each of those installations mitigated a different amount. So if it mitigated more, it was usually more expensive. There's kind of a correlation with that. But if your income was high, they would work out that formula, and then through an application process, you would find out what you would pay into it. I think it's complicated. I think that's complicated. I know in our system, our rebate system, it's basically a means test based on the ability to pay. So, at the basis of this is that we don't want people who can't afford this to be hit with something, and if they want to do the right thing, to be able to do the right thing, and hopefully the town can help make that happen. That's our goal. The details of that are complicated, and it's very hard for someone like Paul to be able to answer a question like that on a means test because, not knowing what your income is, not knowing what you value, your land, all these things that go into that is a complicated formula. But you should know at the root of what we're trying to do in the town is that we want to be, and I remember when I served on the Conservation Board, we had people who wanted to put these systems in, and we had to say no because they weren't approved. Well, now 4R, 3 are approved, and you can put them in. And we want to make sure that can be done on the voluntary basis, not on a mandated basis, and cause all sorts of problems for people and their affordability to do something. You should want to do the right thing, but you should also be able to do the right thing.
And Councilman, if I may add, I mentioned earlier the loan program, which is at 3%, and that 3% loan is actually over a 15-year span. So, it's a low interest rate, and that loan can be used to supplement the cost of the system. So there is always that option for homeowners.
So that's the three. That's a grant, that's a loan, right? And then in the town may have a
Yes.
rebate that could be the trifecta of that to help our residents in Southampton. How we integrate that is problematic, as you can imagine, because you don't want to be one of those people who say 10 years from now want to put that system in. The county ran out of money, but it's only CPF, but, you know, so it has to be done as fairly as we can possibly do it. It's not as easy as it sounds. Well, if you could go to the mic.
By now, I forgot what the question, I know it's probably online, and I was just looking up the requirements, actually, because I did read about you have to have 3 people live in the house, your property has to be a certain size, or less than a certain size. You're eligible for the $11,000 grant if you make less than $300,000 a year. $300,000.
So you're in now.
So you lose.
I'm just guessing.
This is a rebate program, so you
Well,
have to...
which program are you talking about? The county now?
Well, I guess it's a question for both. It's a rebate, right? So you have to put up the money first, and then you get reimbursed all of your expenses. And would that include, for example, the costs of, if I was eligible, which I'm not, because less than 3 people live in my house, even though I'm close to the water on the right size property, you would have to, I assume if I was going to do this, I would be calling different people to give me an estimate, give me a cost. Maybe I have to get somebody to do some technical type of an electrician. I have to get all that together. So does the reimbursement, it is a reimbursement, right? You have to pay everything and then you'll get money back?
That's not how it was. That's not my understanding of it.
Well, then what is your understanding? I don't.
So it is a grant that you apply for, right?
Right.
And how it was explained to me, I don't think you pay up front first.
Well, that's fine. I just want to make sure that.
You're saying that if the septic system costs you $20,000, that you would have to pay the entire $20,000, and then the county would reimburse you for whatever portion they're giving you back.
No, I'm asking whether you as a homeowner, to get a rebate, do you have to put out the money first and then apply for a rebate? Or is it an actual grant where they give you the money before you spend any of your own?
It is a grant. You're making that application before you actually start to do anything.
And they will cover what I guess sometimes you'd call maybe, I don't know, soft costs or whatever. They cover every aspect of it up to $11,000.
Well, it's actually up to 10, and if you get the shallow drain field, which is a higher pressurized system, it's an extra $1,000 because it
According
costs
to
a
all
little
the
more.
news articles, it's 11, but let's not quibble over 1,000.
Well, let's not
because,
quibble. It is 10,000.
You know.
And that 1,000 does have a particular criteria to it.
Right, but there are no costs, like let's say we talked about landscaping, we talked about electric. Are there any costs that are specifically excluded from grant eligibility?
Not to my knowledge, but I could research it and get back to you on that. It was my understanding that the grant would be for whatever needs to be done to install the system. So that's not to my knowledge, no.
Right, so they'll pay the electric. If you had to landscape or repave your driveway, as long as it was within the 10,000.
Yeah, well, you can only spend whatever your grant application, whatever you qualify for.
Right,
So,
I understand.
I mean,
Yeah, I understand that piece, but
that
there's
would be a-
nothing that's exempt from the grant.
yeah, it's a part of your overall cost, yes.
Maybe we should move that over there.
No, I don't want to ask questions if other people have them. John, it's back to you. So I'm just with what I asked you earlier. You have 90,000 in the CPF now, so that means up to 20%, 18 million could be used for the water quality issues. But then you said 7 to
Well,
12.
don't forget, this year is based on the previous
Okay,
year.
but then you said 7 to 12 million. So I'm not quite following how much money is available. Is it available to use now, or are you talking about next year? That also confused me.
Well,
You said-
the funds that are available now are based on last year's fund
Right, so
balance.
what is available now,
As I said, it's been somewhere between 7 and 12 million. That's what
Okay.
we estimate.
even though 90 million is in the fund, and that would...
That's in the fund today,
Okay.
all right? But the fund amount that's available is always based on the previous year.
Okay, so you can only base it on the previous
Right.
year's
Right, and some years...
transfers of
Right, and
what
some
came
years
in.
the fund does
Okay,
better than other
okay.
years, you know.
What
We've
is the
had it-
trend-
we-
what is
We've
the
had
trend-
it as low as 40,000, 40 million, I think, at one point.
What has the
45.
trend been, let's say, just the last 5, 7 years? As amount of money in the CPF fund year after year?
I
What's
would
the-
say that if I did an aggregate, it's about 60 million over the last 5 years.
60 million would be about a normal year, is what you're saying?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. So, okay.
But Mary Wilson is the director of the CPF, and she can get you the numbers. I believe they're posted. There's public information should be available. There's fund balance that's in the CPF at any given time.
I'm hearing Al behind me, and something I was also asking, but I think I heard what he said, but you can spend up to 20%, but are you required to spend?
No.
You can spend anywhere from 0 to 20%.
That's correct.
It's completely at the discretion of the board.
Yes,
How
it
to
is.
divvy it up.
Correct.
Between preserving land or doing whatever.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, I had a separate question. You haven't mentioned it yet. It came up at a meeting, and I was surprised by which town member, I think I remember who it was, but I'm not going to say, who was very wary, let's say, but completely against the notion of stopping homeowners from using pesticides and fertilizers. I thought that was something, it was asked, and one of the town members said, oh my gosh, we could be exposed to litigation, we can't do that, and I don't know if that person's afraid of Monsanto or whatnot, but a town can outlaw, just like this town outlawed plastic bags. A town can say, we won't allow the sale of pesticides, certain fertilizers, and things of this nature, because people are using it all over.
Well,
People on
so-
waterfront property are using it all
Right.
over. So you go by a property, it's pristine and green, that homeowner might be going hallelujah, but it's damaging the base. So I'm surprised the town, I never hear anyone mention it. What about the issue?
It's controlled through the DEC, and one of the problems is exactly that while we can mandate something of that nature, we can't control it. So if you went to Home Depot, they would still stock the
Of
chemical that was
course, but you
allowed in
could
New
stop it
York
being
State.
sold in town in Southampton. If
Well,
I go
that's- how
to
do you-
another township, I
right.
can buy it, but at least
Yeah.
not in,
That's a difficult thing to enforce. I mean, it's something we're talking about
I'm
right
not following
now.
then, John. I'm asking again. Let me ask it in a more clear way. Maybe I'm not asking it in an appropriate way. I'm a homeowner. I'm being hypothetical. I don't use pesticides or things like that. I want to put pesticides in my yard. I live in town of Southampton. I go to the local hardware store. Sorry, we can't sell pesticides here in town of Southampton. Okay, now it's incumbent upon me to go to a different township to go buy it. Aren't I asking something that's clear? That town of Southampton could say, we won't allow merchants within the township of Southampton to sell certain fertilizers, pesticides, and things of this nature. Okay, if you want to go to Home Depot and go to another township, that's out of our
I
auspices.
would imagine we can.
So
if
why
we have-
wouldn't you?
Well, it's something we're talking about, but it's not right.
It's a contributing factor,
Well,
though,
of
John.
course
It's a
it
simple
is.
one to legislate,
It's
because
not
here
a
you have a
sim-
problem in...
Well, hold on.
Okay,
It's
sorry.
not that
No, but I mean,
simple
it's
to
a simple
legislate.
issue, right?
It-
We
Who's
wanna-
gonna stop using it?
Well, I was-
Then they
Stop
at
the
least-
water, and I see what
Who's stopping you
people
from
do.
using a plastic bag? If you go to King Cullen now, wherever you shop, you don't get a plastic
I
bag.
don't-
You
look.
go- You want a plastic bags, go to another township, I guess.
I don't
Okay.
disagree that issue is a serious issue, and it's not something that we're overlooking. But it's not as easy as it sounds to do that. It's difficult. We can do that. You can legislate no more plastic bags, but certain incorporated villages won't adhere to that. West Hampton Beach is a perfect example, right? So if you want plastic bags, go shop in West Hampton Beach. We can't mandate that. I know the county is trying to do this. I know they're working on plastic bag legislation townwide. I'm not sure, or countywide. I'm not sure they're getting anywhere with that. It's a difficult thing to go up against, and most municipalities would much rather have their citizens be do this voluntarily by being educated how badly these things affect our waters and what happens in it. Does that happen? No. Is it an easy thing to say? Sure. It's easy to say, yeah, I want you all, you would all just stop using it tomorrow. It's like saying, well, stop using Roundup tomorrow. And yet it's advertised all the time. How do you stop that? Well, first you ask the citizenry, will you guys stop doing that? Once you know what it does, you can no longer say, I don't know that I was doing this, now I'm going to stop. And that's what you would like people to do. I think that's what happened with water quality as an issue. We didn't realize, for the most part, what we were doing every time we flushed our toilet. But when we got educated to do it, I think a lot of people, I think the 80% of the people who passed the CPF fund was a sheer perfect indication to me that when you learn about something and you learn about the detrimental effects of it, you'll stop doing it. That doesn't necessarily mean it applies to everybody. It doesn't mean it applies to businesses who might not be here, who might be part of the trade parade that come from up west in the island. These are very complicated issues to solve. Would I love to stop the pesticide use today? Absolutely. Would I love to ban methoprene? Absolutely. I've seen the effects of these things. We all have, So citizens like yourself can come up and pound on the table and say, damn, John, do this. And I'll say, yeah, I want to do it. I would like to do it, but I want to do things in an effective way, not tokenism, not just doing something because it sounds good and it's feel-good legislation, but something that has a real effect.
And that, if you don't mind.
No.
And that goes to the public education, like John had referenced, specifically with these things, pesticides, fertilizers, car maintenance, boat maintenance, dog pickup, those sorts of things that when you think about every time it rains, we're washing the earth into our bays. So whatever we could do to filter it further, to follow the rules. Suffolk County has, I think it's Suffolk County, I could be wrong with it being DEC, but they have legislation regarding when you can put the fertilizer down and the ratios aspects of it. And we do give presentations on stormwater education to that effect, composting on site, that sort of thing. I really like the irrigation out of the upper glacial aquifer comment. We talk about sewer districts in the downtown areas, and I'm a big fan of what Riverhead did with Indian Island Golf Course in terms of using the wastewater effluent to irrigate their golf course. That took almost 10 years, probably more than 10 years to get that to the point where they could irrigate, but you look at different states and they've been doing it for years. The purple pipe.
The fertigation wells, is something that's in our plan that we talk about. The USGS does a lot, USDA did a lot of studies on that and the effectivity of it. In some cases very effective, in others not so much. Would it be effective here? Hopefully our plan allows for that to happen so that we can begin to do some of those things which aren't standard. And we have to take some risks here, but not uneducated risks. But we need to move with all alacrity here to get this problem solved. And even at the speed of government, which is glacial, I've been told, it can take many years to do that. So what can we do? Well, you're sitting in the room. You're the ones who can do this. You're the ones that can say, I'm going to make a decision. I'm going to stop using pesticides. I'm going to stop over-fertilizing my emerald green lawn. I'm going to start to think that there's a new aesthetic that maybe isn't emerald green and perfect. And, my mother used to call it the French garden because basically she did nothing with it and let it grow and we would call it the French garden. But that was our aesthetic and that's what we grew up with and it was natural and we all loved it. And some people don't. Some people don't. So you're changing a culture and that takes some time to do. But I think at the end of the day, what do we want? We want clean water, we want healthy water, we want a beautiful aesthetic community. That's what we love about this place. So are we going to work together to do it, or are we going to shake our fists and we have good partners here. We have Legislator Fleming. You're talking about pesticides, you're talking about the work that she's doing, the work that she's behind a lot of this work that we're talking about today. that's important to have that level of politics involved in this, because that's how it works. It works in conjunction with ourselves and with all of you.
Which that brings me up. Did you want to read the letter from legislative, from Bridget Fleming, or do you want to just say that it's available?
everyone's shaking their heads. saying-
Okay, we have a letter that's available from
I think everyone has
Legislator
I think
Fleming.
everyone has a copy
The
of it.
letter's
Okay.
available.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. And then, just a quick recap. So with the CPF, what do you have legislation to codify it, is that right? When do we expect that to be enacted?
Well, the first legislation is out and ready for public hearing. I'm not sure if it's going to be in Flanders, this, or in our next
Oh,
public
maybe
hearing.
tomorrow, you say?
July.
Is it July 11th?
Yeah, okay.
Christina's telling me.
And have you made a decision on how many members? I read it could be 5 to 7 on the advisory committee?
Yeah, the advisory committee, as Roger can attest, it was problematic in some ways, because we want to have people on there that have the skill set for these larger projects, not just septic systems, but people who have knowledge from hydrology to engineering, who don't really have vested interests. It's not as easy a task. We've started interviewing. We want to keep it a small group, 5 to 7 people at most. As we see the septic system moving towards its logical pathway, and it'll be on autopilot, I think, when things work pretty well. Once we get there, our advisory group, after we've interviewed a whole host of different people, which has been going on, and it's people representing different communities, the farming community and the stakeholders, the people with the skill set, to put that together. And we're talking about things like blind application processes for some of these things, so that we can avail ourselves of expertise around the world from people that we might need if we don't feel we have that kind of skill set for those kinds of things here.
Do they have to have, so then you don't have to live in Southampton then?
Well, you do under the CPF law, and in order to do that, you have to have a waiver. The person has to have a waiver to be on the board, and that's something we're looking into. I don't really care. Personally, I would like to see the people with the skill sets that they can address these things objectively without any sort of connection or vested interest. That's all that I care about, because I think that holds the process up.
I think that's totally laudatory. So is there an actual, though, like, okay, when do you think you must have timeline expectations, when do you hope to have the legislation totally in place? Do you
Well,
have
our original goal was the third quarter of this year. I think we're ahead right now. So I'm hoping the first piece of legislation for that, for the new construction part of it in the 0 to 2 travel areas, will be through public hearing July 11th, as we said. And then the rebate system to follow right along on top of that, so that once you have that in place, then as it is voluntary right now, you can get the systems. And I should say, someone had mentioned before that the way those systems are put in place is that the person who installs those systems has to be certified and registered through the county to do that. They have to be certified within that particular system. And that's really important to know, that you're not shopping around, but there's a list of people who've gone through a fairly extensive training on these particular systems and how to install them. And that's very critical, I think, to having them installed correctly, so that they operate and are functional. So when that's in place, then we're as I said, we have a draft of the rebate, or it's being worked on right now. That should quickly follow that. So I think we're ahead of schedule, but our original goal, and a goal as of today, is still the third quarter of this year.
So before year end, then you're hoping
Oh,
that
absolutely.
people can actually start
Yes.
obtaining
I'm hoping before that.
financial assistance and approval from the county, and you have the certification program in place at the county?
That's already in place. And to the financial part, that's coming out July 1st. You'll be able to put the application in for the grant.
Right,
So.
and then the CPF side of any money that you hope to have available by year end?
Yeah,
before
well,
year end?
we have a rebate or system in place already in the town, so that needs to be modified for these systems, and that's what the planning department is working on right now.
But then some of the money flow will start coming from CPF, and you expect that flow also to start coming in before year end?
Oh, yes, yeah,
Okay.
we hope to have everything rolled out before year's end.
And just to go to the logistics of the systems, they don't necessarily, they're going to be different in the aesthetics than they have been in the past, because the county's going to require the castings to be brought to grade with covers on them. So you're gonna see your system to be able to have bragging rights to it, I'll say. And that's the nerd in me talking. But it's gonna be a little bit more of a part of your life. You know, when you're painting your bathroom, you shouldn't be washing the paintbrush into the sink that's going into that sanitary system, because it's all based on biological function. So you really want to start thinking about things like that after you make this capital investment into your home. You know, open the top, let the paint dry out, bring it to the transfer station. When it turns solid, hose out the putty brush outside so you can reuse it, and just know that systems like these, in addition to any systems that we're talking about that's used to filter stormwater, wastewater, what have you, they need maintenance sometimes. So it's not a set it and forget it system, which it has been for the past how many years. So.
Paul, just to go back to what I said, no, it's very quick, very quick. I think it really would be a good idea to do an FAQ, because some of the things, I just looked up right now, it's the same wonderful thing, this internet thing. So basically, the program does not reimburse you for landscaping. It does not reimburse you for paving. It only reimburses you for the purchase and installation of the actual system. So what we kind of mentioned earlier about it covers everything up to the grant amount, I don't think is correct based on what I just read on the website. So maybe it would be a good idea to do some bullets of these things, because there's some confusing or maybe not clear or info coming out here.
And, again, anyone that's here or anyone that wants to get information on the system, or you guys are more than welcome to call the office. We will give you the information. If it's something that we don't have, the health department, which is working on this, we can get the information and give it to you. So you're more than welcome to reach out to our office to get that.
And I should point out that, you bring up a point, which is something I discovered. I'm just an engineer, not a lawyer. And to write legislation, when you write something like you just read that says installation, well, that could be interpreted as landscaping.
Well, no, specifically.
I understand that, but you see where sometimes words really do matter and how that does. And so I know there are, particularly in the CPF, there are opinions groups that will weigh in on that type of thing. That's exactly one of the reasons why we want to go slowly, so that we learn those kinds of things. We learned, as an example, that we need to have inspections on any wires that are put underground. That was something new, because that wasn't something that was considered in septic systems ever before, at least in the town. So we had to understand how that worked, how they were inspected, how long they might have to travel if the septic system is put somewhere else. And when you dig up that trench to put that cable in, now you're landscaping. So, there was some things that are really important. Absolutely, absolutely. So,
Which is why I said, it's better if you reach out, if you call me in the office, I could reach out to the health department, the guys that are working on it, and ask them specifically, if the septic system is, let's say, in your driveway and you're going to have to do this to it, can you use grant funding on that?
and you can reach Justin Jobin is his name.
But we could work with the county and Legislator Fleming's office to come up with a fact sheet that can be distributed out through the distribution list as well.
Yeah, I just said that we'll send it out to the entire membership, and we'll ask heads of other groups in town, and we'll get it disseminated widely once it's put together. Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Totally agree. And Vicki, I'm sorry, you've been so patient.
Oh, that's okay. I just want to share that it's my understanding that whether it's county grant money or grant money from the town, it is not, those programs are not designed to entirely underwrite the replacement or remediation or upgrade of a septic system. that the cost is going to be above and beyond whatever the grant monies that are available. You got to have skin in the game, and that's understood. My question is, and I guess this is primarily the town legislation, potential funding, is will that CPF money up to 20% be proportionally distributed like it is they try to do within the CPF land purchases based on where those funds have come in?
No.
So then we are not, as a hamlet, competing amongst ourselves, first come, first serve, for what monies are available only within hamlet. We as a community at large are going to be trying to be the cutting edge and taking advantage of the financial support to explore that new technology as a community at large, as a whole township.
Absolutely, and that's the way the fund was originally designed to operate. And, and I know there've been some recent attempts through some of the incorporated villages who say we pay more into it, therefore we should get more. We try to be cognizant of that, obviously, but in this, we cannot do that.
Yeah, on the land,
Right.
that might make sense
Yeah.
because it's in their neighborhood, but
also-
on the water, we all share the same water bodies.
Exactly, and it also has to do with where those watersheds are and what that travel time is.
And
We're-
then
we're
in-
trying to correct a problem, and the geography of it is not as relevant except in terms of where those high watersheds areas are and those high loading areas are.
So for the town to evaluate in the best case scenario, you're going to be inundated with applications for grant money, perhaps more than you have the ability to fund.
Well, we don't have grants, we're not issuing grants, we're issuing rebates.
Okay, rebate
Right.
money.
And it is potentially, yeah, and that's a concern that we had and have. That's why we've limited it right now to new construction as a mandate, not townwide, and limited it to substantial reconstruction. But yeah, it is. I mean, the first question I asked to one of the manufacturers was, well, can you handle all the septic systems that we could possibly have if we got an application in one day? And the simple answer was no. They can do 5, 6, 7,000 at a time, and will that happen? There's going to be a wait and see. Obviously, people are going to wait and see. If I was going to wait and see, I would wait and see how the county is going to try to help, or what their grant monies are and loan subsidies, loan applications are, what that means to a homeowner versus what the CPF can add on top of that to make it neutral to you. That would be wonderful. I don't think that can happen, and you're right, you need skin in the game. Absolutely you do, but it's to what degree that we're kind of wrestling with right now.
Yeah, but if you have the best case scenario where a lot of the community is applying either for upgrades or in renovations or in new constructions, wanted to try an IA system, then you have more than you can accommodate, then you have to look at your pool of applicants and start doing a triage as
Yep.
to which is the water body most detrimentally affected
Yep.
right now, and then do an individual evaluation of, well, this is new construction, it was going to go in anyway, versus this is an old system but it hasn't failed yet, versus this is an old system that's failing, that's contributing terribly. And I just have to say,
That's exactly.
I don't
what we
want that
consider.
job. I bless you for thinking about taking it. And
I don't want it either.
yeah, but I'm really glad that the town is going to do this, because
Well, as I said at the beginning, we would have an advisory board that would look at those initial septic system application exactly for those reasons that you mentioned, to be able to put some sort of priority on that. So if it was someone upland in a 20-year travel time versus somebody who's right near the bay, and we have high loading, or it's a different megalith, or a different aquifer, that might make a difference. All that criteria has to go into that evaluation. So there would be awarded on that basis. That's why I said at the beginning, I think that ultimately it'll go on autopilot. Once it gets to that point, it will go to the building department like it is now, but we need to have some kind of gatekeeper on that so that we don't extinguish those funds very rapidly. We need to also have some funds for these other projects that I think are very, very important.
And those are more municipal and larger ticket.
They are. Yeah,
price, so, yeah.
And most of those would not be entirely CPF funded, and CPF also has a limit. Like you can't do plans on that. You can't do feasibilities studies with that money. You have to, you have
Or
to.
management of CPF properties, which is a problem.
Yes, and that's another issue, the inventory management of housing and those sorts of things. So, yeah, that's why we're taking the slow approach, and I hope the residents of the town understand why we're doing that. I think you articulated it very well. It's exactly why we're doing that.
For myself and anybody who gets to watch this or listen to this, if somebody wanted to see where their property fell in the hierarchy of the time to watershed, what would be the best resources? That Suffolk County and what is it? The health department's website?
Our CPF plan is online, and those areas are marked. There may be some changes to that based on what the LINAP comes back to us with, what the county comes back to corroborate what we've evolved here.
Yeah, hold that up.
Is
So
that-
the town right now has what they prefer you to work off of right now.
Yes.
But they'll be tweaking from the lineup and
Yep.
two others.
Yeah, when we get more fidelity, particularly with the sub-watersheds, for instance, that has on there on the Dune Road and in some areas that may not necessarily be, but that's the plan there, and you can find it online.
Cool.
But you'd have to apply, and then, that would have to go through that group just to verify that. We're supposed to get the LINAP numbers by the end of this month, so I'm waiting
Hey,
for it.
you're
But
s-
we
and
feel
yet he
pretty good.
persists.
We feel pretty good that we're close. We're pretty
Excellent.
close to that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Based on our conversations. We're not doing this in a vacuum. A lot of this is based on USGS, and a lot of based on the Southampton University's work and many other researchers on that, so.
Thank you.
John, I have one question you probably answer. Is it a fact that there's 4,000 cesspools in danger, old cesspools?
In
right now?
danger?
Yeah, old
I-
cesspools installed.
We have a lot. We have,
you know that
Suffolk
figure?
County has about 360,000, as I understand, septic systems and cesspools. We have some pretty old systems that were built in the 50s, the old step brick, literally red brick built septic systems. That's what a lot of houses have.
What do you think that total
That number
amount is?
yeah, I think that's a little high in my view.
Okay. I keep hearing that, and it does
Yeah,
sound high.
It does sound high to me. We have, I estimate we have roughly 90-something thousand systems in the town of Southampton alone. But some of those are also business built, and it's as Roger said, it has a lot to do with the flow rates, and there's this sort of a weird gray area when in responsibility between the Suffolk County Department of Health Services and the DEC responsibility. So when it becomes a sewage treatment plant as opposed to, so I kind of use a rough number of 15,000 gallons. These numbers going to move back and forth a lot because nothing's ever quite.
It sounds unsurmountable, like
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
never
it-
going to get there, but
we
we'll
will.
keep
We'll-
trying.
We'll definitely
Yep,
get there.
I agree.
There's no doubt about it.
Thank
I
you.
hope to live to get to see that.
that's my problem. Okay,
But we
thank
will.
you.
Thank you.
Actually, before she asks her next question, I remember you guys asked about the grant funding, and I just want to make sure I gave you a correct information. I remember I told you when you were asking about the funding, if I did say $400,000 was for the grant, that was supposed to be 400,000 homeowners will be offered the grant.
Not 400,000.
400, yes, you're correct, 400, not 400,000, but 400, you're right.
I thought
So-
my business was over.
Yeah, you're right. So yeah, that's like the whole county. No. So, I just wanted to clear that part up as far as the actual funding goes, so, sorry about that.
Two questions, hi. My first question is, any thoughts on putting in a sewer system?
Where?
The town?
The
Putting
whole
sewers
town?
like they have everywhere, yeah.
Most
city
people
folk.
have, and I agree with them, that it's technically not feasible, given some of the geology that we have and the fact that we're so spread out in the residents cost-wise. In some areas where you have higher density, it would make perfect sense. Riverside plans to do that in their development. I think West Hampton Beach is looking at Southampton Town, where you have higher density. That makes more sense to do, but in very wide, spread out areas. A lot of these systems are gravity fed. meaning that it's got to go downhill, and that doesn't always work very well. To replace that with vacuum systems that actually suck or pump effluent in where it has to go, that adds another level of complexity and cost. And it also has an aesthetic impact. Pumping stations are not probably what people want. It's not been considered based on our zoning, how spread out we are, except in those denser areas, denser residents.
So that probably would never happen.
Yeah, yeah, and here's the downside of that. If you think about it, if you put in a sewage district, a sewage treatment plant, you by default can create higher density over time. Because if the system is designed for more houses to attach to it, build it and they will come. That's an argument that some people will make. Whether you believe that or not is, I'm not offering an opinion on that, but that's an argument that's been made for not putting in sewage treatment plants in low density areas, because by doing that you could potentially increase density.
Yeah, we don't want any more people.
Or houses, maybe, I don't
Yeah.
know, but, I don't have an opinion on that. I'm just saying
I
that
do.
dealing with what we're
live
dealing with
here.
right now, we need to really consider those things very, very carefully.
Well, John,
Okay.
aren't they discussing more like cluster systems and situations?
Yeah, the
like-
small cluster systems seem to be great in developments that have the right kinds of densities. It's a cost savings that can be passed on to that small community. Again, though, it has the issue of it has to be built exactly for the number of residents, not more. And that's something that has to be looked at and tightly observed and controlled, I think.
Okay, and my
You're asking
second
me
question.
philosophical questions.
My second question is if I applied and got a grant from the county, then could I get a rebate from the town at some point, or because I'm not, I don't know if I want to do it, I just put solar in, and I do want to do it, but, I want to upgrade, but I don't want to find out in 3 months that, I got this and I could have had that.
Well, see, there's the dilemma. There's our dilemma. It is an issue for us. Whether the county, will have enough to continue in that vein is difficult for us to predict. And I don't want it to be an unfair, me personally, I would not like it to be an unfair playing field, where some people got both the county and CPF and others only got the county, and then still others only got the CPF. We're treading very carefully because we're not entirely sure how that's all going to work, and please bear with us while we try to
Well, I'm not sure
understand this.
whether to bear with you, or go ahead and file with the county.
Go
and-
file with the county right now. That's what I would suggest.
Okay, and then I'll work through that
Because it may
process
not
and
be
see
there.
where you
We'll
end
be
up.
here for a while, but that might not be there all the time.
Okay,
And I'm being a little facetious, but I think it's better if you want to do the right thing, and you have an opportunity to do that, and
well, we're on the water, and I do,
yeah, and
I
I
do want to
appreciate
do the
you
right
saying
thing.
that, and I appreciate you putting in solar as well. We're.
I'm thrilled, I count the money on my app every day, that I'm saving on my air conditioning.
The Tiana Center will be the first municipal building with solar panels on it. It's the first one in the town. And when you look at the rest of the world, what they're doing, we're very behind the curve. And we're getting speed. We're going faster right now.
Well, I know that,
And I know Christina's about to jump right in.
Yeah.
I know that there's a big, need for it east of the canal, the power, and you're either going to keep running those ugly lines, or,
Well, there's, it's all, as you know, the town just made a statement that we're going to be energy independent by 2025, and we were also designated one of the first clean communities, and we're doing pretty well. And a lot of that has to do with this lady sitting next to me, who quietly, in her own way, pushes hard for this stuff, and
Good.
and it is good.
it's important for the next generation.
It
And
is.
we have a Long Island, we have actually a Tri-Energy program where we're offering to residents of the town free home energy audits, free solar assessments through the Long Island Green Homes program. So if you'd like us to come back and give a presentation, we would love to do that.
We'd love to have you.
Yeah, it's a
Perfect.
really interesting program.
Yeah.
It's a very cool way to save, and we're doing the offshore wind, don't forget we have those
Absolutely.
programs too.
Yeah, that's the program we went through. But what was helpful also, just to mention, the solar. I went to San Gennaro Feast and you had
The
people there.
Tri-Energy.
That's
who-
Tri-Energy.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you had people there who were like, this is the person that the town picked. The town's regulating their prices and their profit. It made it a no-brainer to just use that person, get the solar. And I had someone else in before that was a total nightmare. Put holes in a brand-new roof. But, you know, as I said, he's right there. He's recommended by the town. The prices were set. It was like, yeah, come on in, give me a price. Done.
I'm glad to hear you had a good experience.
Yes, very
That
good.
Most people have said that, so
Oh,
that's
it's a great experience.
Yeah.
They're great people, very nice.
That was called the Solarize Southampton program. That was
Yes.
part of the Tri-Energy. We're not doing the Solarize Southampton component anymore, but through the Long Island Green Homes organization, we have, I believe, 4 different solar vendors that they're allocating when you call up for a free solar assessment that offer that same type of model.
So it was great, because I didn't
it's-
have to do a lot of research or anything else. Like, you did it, you know? You
and
did
We
it, you
passed
gave me the people.
legislation, solar legislation recently. We've moved ahead with a lot of things that are available. It probably hasn't caught up with a lot of people, but you have a lot of opportunities to do the right thing. And it's,
The only thing I was surprised at, that, you know, that the electric company didn't offer any rebates on that. You would have thought they would have.
They did, they used to.
They used to, but they don't anymore.
They used to, and now with the Long Island Green Homes, which is part of the Tri-Energy, PSEG is actually one of the contributing partners for that. So they come in and do a free home energy assessment through a BPI certified contractor, which is a building institute. It's a certified organization, and they do the blower door test and that sort of thing, and they can do up to a certain amount of LED light replacements, and they
Yeah.
could put you into different programs where they see fit. The solar vendors also take advantages of the federal tax credit, the state tax credit, and any other rebates that they can get. And they'll offer
yeah.
that to you in the pallet, but it would be nice to see PSEG do more in terms of solar rebates.
Yeah, well,
Of course,
I'm
they
having fun
used,
with it, too.
they used to
Yeah,
have like a
exactly. Yeah, that's good.
$2,500.
And when I get up in the morning, it's really hot, and
Yeah.
I go to turn on the air, I'm going, hey, this is free now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you can go charge your solar, your Prius or other electric car with that
With
kind
it,
of
right.
system.
And now we're going to, thank you so much. We're going to have to make this our last question because we actually have a deadline where we have to vacate the premises. And then after Maria does,
Yeah, I don't have a question, I just have a comment, because I think that John really hit the nail on the head when he said that education is the way forward. And I just want to remind everyone that Wednesday at 10 o'clock, you are opening Tiana, and it would be really nice to see some support out there and let people know what this is really about and pass the word along.
It's about raising oysters in this particular case, and it's a work in progress, but
Great.
please join us. It's a start of hopefully many more of these centers that we're going to put into the town of Southampton to help educate people about agriculture, in particular in this case.
that's terrific, and we're really looking forward to the opening and the continued program. And I wanted to thank you all so much for the participation. I know we bombarded you with a lot of questions, but And then, if everybody could just stay in their seats for one more moment, Ron Fisher, from one of our fellow civic associations, Franca, has just a quick announcement.
Sure. So we developed an app at Franca. It's a historic landmark app, and it's got all the landmarks that are in Southampton, all the historically significant buildings, and it's all in a really convenient app. So if you use your smartphone, if you download apps, just search Franca in the Apple Store or the Google Store. So the first version is ready. We've got the Liaison Hat Shop. We've got the Ellis Squire's house. So what it does is you can view pictures that the town has in record, some history about it, when it was landmarked, who landmarked it, that kind of stuff. So it's really cool. So if you're a history buff, I encourage you to check out the app. It's totally free, and we're doing that. We did that through Franca. So take a look. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron, and again, thank you, our participants.
Thank you.